Hello, everyone. This is Yifang. Welcome to Watching Silent Films podcast. You're on with my co-host Bob and Lily. Hello,
Hey.
Bob. Hello,
Hey
Lily.
guys, what's up?
Greetings. Thank you, listeners, for staying with us. And currently, at the time of this recording, there's a bunch of coronavirus, what would you say, pandemic, lockdown, stay-at-home stuff going on.
Nightmare, hellhole.
Yeah, all that sorts of
Nightmare
stuff.
times 2.
Mhm.
The silent, deadly predator.
Oh,
Ugh.
yes.
Fear,
Yeah, so
everything.
yeah, all that stuff. Our feature review this particular week is going to be for the Kino, who is a publisher of DVDs and Blu-rays and movies and stuff, for independents as well as classics. They've released a while ago a 3-disc set called the Gaumont set. Gaumont is a movie studio from the late 1800s, 1890s, through really, most of the 20th century. They have a lot of archives now. But long story short, we're going to focus on disc 1 and of that set, of the DVD set. And the reason is because it's Alice Guy-Blaché's works collected in a single disc. It lasts about 3 and some hours, so we're not going to do a whole thing today. We're going to do it's organized by year, and it's 1897 all the way through, what year did it end here?
1917, I believe.
1905.
Whoops.
That's
too
the
far.
end of the portion that we're going to review. Next week we're gonna just tackle the birth, the life, and death of Christ film that she did. It's about 40 to minute or an hour, something like that. And then after that, we'll kind of finish up the rest of the disc 1 from 1906 all the way through 1907. So that's the rest of the disc 1 there. And so that's what we're gonna do for this week as well as the next couple of weeks. And I guess just a quick question up there for Bob and Lee. You hadn't seen anything in the classic realm recently, have you?
No.
Okay. Lily?
The only not classic, because the last time I did mine on the cheat, 1915. The only movie I watched was from 1966. I had to watch Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and oh my god!
Oh, you had to, huh? Was that homework?
It was homework for a film I'm supposed to be working on, but it's going to be later, mid June and July, because my director he was basically basing the camera angles off that movie for his. But I have the play too. I haven't read it yet, but oh my gosh, it's just, the movie was so exhausting. Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Byrne, I think so, yeah. I mean, it's like, I don't even know if it was good because it was just so argumentative, and I don't know what was going on. Of course, they always change stuff from the screenplay to the actual play, and vice versa. But yikes! I mean, I had a Wikipedia what the movie was even about after, because I just could not figure out why they were so awful.
You seen that, Bob?
I have. It was a long time ago, but yeah, it's she's an insane woman. I mean,
They're both insane.
it's later in her career too. I mean,
I feel like it was one of the last movies she did. It's definitely on the tail end of things, I think. I'm not sure she did anything else after that, except for cameos and stuff like that I'm aware of. Although, like I said before on previous podcasts, that's one of my weak spots is the 1930s through 80s probably. Huge chunks of movie history missing for me. But anywho, did you like that one, Bob?
did I like the movie? Not really. I'm not a big fan of Elizabeth Taylor, to be honest with you. Richard Burton's pretty cool, but I've never been a fan of Elizabeth Taylor.
You like Cleopatra?
And the spectacle of it, sure, it's the majesty of it, the endless stand-ins and all that. It's amazing. CinemaScope. But
one thing I liked about this movie, though, was George Segal was in it. So
Yeah.
I know him for being in The Goldbergs. the
he's
TV
so
show.
funny.
He's so funny, and I was just, and when he, I hadn't seen him young before either, so I was like, oh, he's so cute. But
He
that's
is.
50 years ago.
Right.
But it was neat to see. Well, out of everybody, he's the only actor still alive, which is kind of sad. The woman who played his wife died when she was like 40. She had some kind of cancer, I think. I don't know when Richard Byrne died. Am I saying his name right? Richard Burns? Richard Byrne? I don't even know. And then I don't even know when Liz Taylor died. But it was nice to see him in a different role that wasn't funny, since I only know him as a funny guy.
Yeah. Now, wasn't Elizabeth Taylor like an alcoholic in that? Wasn't that the big problem, the central problem with?
She was definitely a drunk, but she could
Yeah.
hold her liquor.
Ah.
But at the same time, it's like she was just mental
Yeah.
kind of crazy. So
Right.
you don't know if she was drunk or not.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Exhausting is the right word. It's just to watch people that tense for that long. It's like
Yeah.
you just watch. You're like, ugh.
Yep.
No, I don't recommend it. I do recommend it for movie lovers, but not for normal people.
Yeah, it's Richard Burton.
Richard Burton, thank
Burton,
you.
yeah. And he passed away in the
I like
80s.
him as an actor. He's intense.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies of all time is Beckett, and you should see it.
Lots of classics.
Yep.
That's for sure.
Have you seen Beckett?
I've heard of that one. It's one of the many gaps, like I said.
Ah, we should watch that together. That's one of my favorites.
Yep. There's a ton. There is a ton.
So let's get down to business.
Yeah, let's do this.
Get down to biz. By the way, Elizabeth Taylor was 2011. She passed away in 2011. Looking at that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So let's get into it. Kino's release of the Gaumont Studios 3-disc set was the first disc was Guy-Blaché, which is going to essentially be our focus for the next couple of weeks. What is interesting, or maybe not so interesting, is that the Gaumont Studio disc, the latter two sort of artists on the disc itself were basically proteges of Alex Guy-Blaché, essentially. So, yeah, it's just amazing that, like, it's her contribution to film history, and it's hard to put into words, but at least the disc 2, Louis Folati, I don't know how to pronounce that name, but we watched a quick short of his a few weeks ago, or one of the previous ones. He did one of the previous shorts too, and so that's that. I'm not sure about the third disc. That might be somebody else I'm thinking of, but to preface, before we get into all of that stuff, I recently had the opportunity to take out the memoir of Alice Guy-Blaché, like her own autobiography. It was translated by, what's this guy's name here? I have the book in front of me. I'm forgetting everything because I read it a while ago now. So it's a memoir of Alice Guy-Blaché, and it's translated by the Simone Blaché, which is the daughter. So it's Alice's daughter, and I don't know if that's either her son or the in-law. I didn't look into that. Then it was edited by Anthony Slide, and it was published by a publishing company in New Jersey, both in Jersey and London, and it's called The Scarecrow. It's a very limited print edition run because essentially it's based on a script, like bunch of just almost like notes on a napkin, scribbles from Alice Guy-Blaché, because she wasn't. I don't think she felt like she was gonna get this published. So because of her depressed and sort of cynical life that had become like later in the years after her kids were grown and stuff, and she started to be more introspective, she was so disheartened that like even though her kids and the people around her who knew her tried to encourage her to write stuff down, like her history, her life history and autobiography, I think she just got totally bogged down. And so what she wrote basically was not like a typical autobiography. I don't know how many autobiographies you guys read, but the ones I read generally are well prepared, and like there's a beginning, middle, and up to that point that if they're still alive, or there's a postscript or epilogue. They're written by somebody they know who's like,
right,
and then they died, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but the way that she wrote it, it was just, it's kind of a smattering of things, like here and there and here and there. And I would say most of it is based on, and it's only a couple hundred pages, it's like 100 pages, that's it, divided by in a few chapters. I would say most of the biography focused on her years in filmmaking, and that's it. I don't think she wrote maybe
not much about her life, personal life.
The autobiography?
Right.
Yeah, she didn't write basically after her film career ended. She just wrote about her film career, life during that time, and that's it. So it's kind of a strange memoir / autobiography. It's got a very narrow focus, and essentially it's like the first like 30, about the 30-ish, 40-ish years of her life. After that, and even her childhood is like basically skipped over. Basically, she just wrote this to document her film contributions to film, essentially.
Right.
And so, which for us is good, because then I didn't have to wade through everything else. Not that it would be bad, but it was. You just get the nuggets, and that's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, anyways, if you have a chance, go check out Be Natural, the documentary about her life that we had reviewed early on, I think.
Be Natural, huh?
Yeah, that's also on Canopy.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. It really kind of encapsulates a lot of what she was about in her life and all that good stuff. But anyway, so the only thing I wanted to point out from the memoir is that she started her work at this Gaumont studio. Gaumont studio at that point in Paris was like a still photography shop, and at that point, still photography has been around since the 1830s. So at that point, it's already been around for like 90 minus 30, probably about 50, 60 years. So they've already had a history of still photography. So that studio at that point was doing still photography, and people would come there and get their pictures taken, essentially. But what was amazing that she started out as a secretary there, and in 1895, the Lumière Brothers demoed the technology demo. I think we talked about this briefly in our previous podcast, where they perform a proof of concept, a technology demo of what film could be, a moving picture, right?
Right.
With the arrival of the train, as well as filming people who are getting off the boat trying to attend their tech demo that morning, and in the afternoon when they're showing it, people are shocked, like, wow, you just shot it this morning and it was moving pictures now. And so she and her boss, the Gaumont people, the owners, attended that tech demo. It was like, we got to get in on this, and they got in on it and started to do moving pictures. At that point, she came in at the right time at the right place. She was a secretary to start, but just a secretary. She wasn't hired, straight away for her other contributions. But in time, when they acquired this technology, she was curious about it, and she learned how to use it and captured all of the stuff that we're going to see on disc 1. And what was amazing is that even before she worked with the cameras, as a secretary, she met a huge and got to know a huge amount of people in Paris. I mean, it's like if her career or her life starts and ends with the fact that, you know, she just worked with Gaumont and that's it, that would have been enough before all this other things about film contributions. You know, I just found that her life, like, it was just amazing, just simply amazing. Here are some of the people that she met because of the fact that she was part of this film studio, both still photography, but also eventually became a moving picture studio. So she met the Eiffel family, who obviously the Eiffel Towers, the people architect and all that stuff. So she got to know their family, like it became a close friend of their families. And she met I'm going to butcher some of these names. Last name was Muscard, the physicist who discovered atmospheric electricity and terrestrial magnetism. She met Emile Roux, disciple and successor of Pasteur, right? Inventor of the diphtheria vaccine. Thierry Martel, the son of a famous surgeon who worked on a lot of famous people, I guess. And another physicist, Caladet, who liquefied gas, air, oxygen. Another, I constantly refer to these people as Renaissance people. Like, it's amazing, just the people who were able to contribute towards sciences, you know. And they weren't just doing one thing; they were doing a variety of things, right? These type of people just don't exist today, you know. You know what I mean? That we know of. So here she lists physicists who, well, I already read that, and you know, high frequency electric current in medicine. Astronomer, geographer who installed the observatory in Mont Blanc. An explorer, Jean Jacquot, who, you know, disappeared in North Pole, one of the many explorers who disappeared there, and on and on. She gave a huge list of people who had contributed to the arts and sciences, essentially Renaissance people of back in the day. It's just astonishing contributions. So it's not all positive. I would say that, like a lot of memoirs written by artists of back in the day, sometimes memory can be deceiving, and sometimes when you write something, you often want to present the best version of yourself.
Of course.
You know, especially
the auto.
There's always a filter when you write autobiography somehow. But regardless of that, it's still interesting, some of her works, her contribution to film itself, or things like film, sort of speed of film, that you can slow down or run films backwards.
Right.
You could do just magic cuts, like, you know, if something is there and then something is not, that just you stop the film.
Did a lot of that.
A lot of that, and it wasn't just her. There's a lot of people who were doing it, but you know, she would write in some of the contributions that she did. A lot of fade in, fades out, double exposures.
Yep. There were a lot of examples of that in this segment we were talking about.
That's why I list out some of these contributions that she made to all this stuff. But that's, I think, the excerpts I'd say that I would take from the memoirs and go from there. So there are a number of shorts on these. When we talk about films, when we talk about early days of silent films, they are more like experiments. That's one.
Demos.
So we talked about that back when we were reviewing the Edison shorts.
Yeah.
When they had the Black Maria.
This is a great selection of demos.
Exactly.
Of what can be done with this technology.
Exactly. And so that's essentially what it is at the start of it. There are some stories behind it, but without context, without the ability to fill in the context, I think we'd be totally lost without the context or context. And, I didn't have time to look up every single context for all these shorts. So we're just going to have to shoot from the hip today. 1897, when they first started, this is essentially some of the earlier works of Alice after she... So in 1895, the tech demo from Lumière Brothers started. And about a year after that, she was still doing secretarial work in addition to trying to experiment with the cameras. So a lot of the works that in 1896 we didn't really see because she didn't really get into it yet. But really, 1896 and 7 was when she started to playing with the technology, the film camera. But a lot of the 90% of her work has been lost, right? These are just but a handful, but she's made hundreds, if not thousands, of shorts, right?
Wow.
In her lifetime, like many people who are in the early silent film era. And she's not alone in that. But the only thing that's more egregious is that historians didn't really attribute a lot of this to her, and so I think she had to just fight more to be known about her contribution, because history often writes, Louis Weber and or many other artisans afterwards are the first quote unquote woman filmmaker, even though she got an early start at the 1895, 96, 97. So, anyways, having said all of that, let's get started with the 1897 year, where in this particular disc we had The Fisherman at the Stream, Bathing in a Stream, and Serpentine Dance by Bob Walter. Maybe that's a choreographer or something.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that set?
I don't think Bob is the dancer. She was a woman.
Yeah, I don't know what ME means. But anyways, what'd you think of the...
That's one of the segments I actually liked.
Yeah?
Yeah. I was kind of bored through a lot of them because they were very rudimentary. And they were obviously demos. But I liked that dance. Artistic. Short. I mean, we're only talking 30 seconds long, something like that. So.
Yeah, well, I would have to say for the beginning demos with the water and the streams, I'm so morbid. I'm just like, everyone is dead now. Watch. I'm the worst.
Well, it's been more than 100 years. Yes.
I know. Just watching them, just living their lives, and like, oh no, everyone's gone. I like those too, because it seems very calming. You're by the stream, you watch these people. It's just like an everyday life, which is probably what they were going for, being a demo. Like, oh, come check out this stream. Come bathe here, bring your dog, bring your family.
Yep. I mean, in that respect, it's a slice of history.
Slice of life.
Yeah, it's like time travel. You kind of go
It's
back
time
in
travel.
time.
Yeah.
That lifestyle, the way they dress, the way they are, it just doesn't exist in that way anymore.
Well, I think it's a great thing to have, because like filmmaking today can now look at it and say, do we get the costumes right?
Right. Or for historians, sometimes city planners or what's that called? Civil engineers actually review some of these early films to look at those early buildings to see if they were still there, because they often would train their camera on cityscapes.
Yep.
And the Hollywood civil engineers often do that because they have these older films. Like, let's run that again. Let's see if that building or that structure or that company is still there, and they do their research. They
have to get it right. Otherwise, it's unbelievable.
So yeah, the Serpentine dance would come again later on. There's another dance version of it, and if you remember, Edison also had her own version of it. I don't know who was quote unquote first, but I feel like, to me, this is more like capturing what performance art was from the late 1800s, and whether it's France or New Jersey, which is what Edison was doing in the Black Mercury studio. It's just so interesting that they were kind of similar. Not exactly the same, and sometimes it is kind of the same with the Serpentine dance, but it is often very similar. Even, I don't know if they actually even talked to each other, or maybe they inspired each other, but it's just so interesting that they had the parallel development. That all the different techniques in the set building and the theatricalness of the people performing things that was doing stage work. You know, it was happening. You know, both in Jersey and in France. Same thing here. Go ahead.
That dance scene also reminded me of the modern. There's a new performance to come out. Shen
Yun.
Yun,
Yeah,
and it reminded me of Shen Yun. Like,
right. Well, of course, all of that is all inspired by stuff from just, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of years of human
culture.
dancing in general.
Right.
So just that's why I say it's a slice of history. It's interesting to see.
Shows roots.
Yeah, how the 1890s does it compared to the modern times, compared to the pre-film, you know, pre-recorded mediums, and so I think that explains some of even the rest of the stuff that we're gonna talk about. Is the 1898 year. She's done more things. There's a one called "The Turn of the Century Blind Man at the Hypnotist." This set is the burglars, disappearing act, surprise attack on the house at daybreak. I would say a lot of these are very theatrical, like a stage play almost. They build sets up and then climb things around. Go ahead.
The guys, they were like two clowns almost, and there was the ladder, and it looked like they were trying to paint, and these guys were getting in the way. But it reminded me of Laurel and Hardy.
Yes. Very funny. I feel like a lot of these sets, they turn out to be, because I've never seen these before, these sets. And I feel like these are funnier than I thought they were going to be. I thought it was just going to be more serious, but it turns out a bunch of these sets are pretty hilarious. A lot of comedy, theatrical comedy, stage comedy.
Yeah. I don't know if you're up to it yet, but we're in the stage with the statue, or is that still? Did you mention that yet?
That is.
I think that comes a little later, but I
don't
know which one you're talking about.
That one is.
But the magician, and let's see, the magician, and there was another one. They basically were using the same technology.
Yeah.
Of making things disappear.
Yes, the cutting.
Yep.
Yeah.
I like those magician ones a lot, just because they are so rudimentary, but they're still fun to watch.
The statue in 1905 and the magician's arms is what we're talking about further down the list. And the bricklayers. Yeah, it's further on down. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, both the comedic roots, this theatrical performance, you could almost tell that it was just entertainers who were on stage, basically hired to be recreating some of their acts in front of the camera so that you could capture it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, that set that we just talked about had some of that disappearing act thing. To be fair, a lot of these also around 1890s, after that Lumière Brothers tech demo, guess who else was doing similar things? George Méliès, right? The guy who did the moon. And so his shorts, if you look him up on the YouTube, his shorts also had a lot of theatrical, funny business and a lot of disappearing.
Yeah. Well, tomorrow, my brother and I are going to watch Hugo.
Well, there you go.
Oh, so good.
So good. I watched it many times already. Yeah, my brother has seen it once, but we're gonna watch it again tomorrow afternoon. So.
But yeah, so that's I would say those intercuts, those disappearing things, from these sets were absolutely of the same ilk and of the same likes of using the camera techniques to do that. 1899. Go ahead.
Now the disappearing that she was doing with those clips, was she the first one to be showing that?
To do the cuts, you mean?
The technique for making things look like they were disappearing. Was she the first one? Was that her creativity?
Well, this is 1898, and Méliès was doing it in 1898 as well.
Oh, okay.
Which is why, how do you determine first, right? Like, did she come up with this 1896, and Méliès came in
Yeah,
18.
contemporaries. It's
Yeah, like it's so hard to say first because, and plus,
Right.
like, what of the lost films? Like nobody's
Right.
maybe you can describe in the lost films that
So it's a mystery lost to time, which we'll probably
nobody
never
really
know.
knows who's
Yeah.
first at the end of the day. Like, like
Unless we make another gold rush find.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I would say people like Méliès and Alice, they're very early. They're definitely early experiments, of these techniques. They were definitely early acts. But they're not the first. They were one of the first, I would say.
Gotcha.
So beyond that, there's 1899. There's At the Club, Wonderful Absinthe, and down towards the 1900s. There's an opera one. There's an automated hat maker and sausage grinder.
That was hysterical.
Yes, your turn on.
That was so funny.
Yeah, they're all much funnier than I expected them to be.
Yeah, I mean, just to see the hats popping out and the sausage popping
At the
out, it
same
was
time.
like, and they put like alcohol and water in. And it's like, what the heck? I was like, what are they making?
Yeah,
Sausages and hats.
exactly. That's how you do it, right? Using an automated machine. Also, At the Photographer was pretty funny in the sense that it's kind of a little bit like inside joke because Gaumont Studios does still photography, and they probably had people trying to take pictures acting that way, like trying to move a plant. It's the guy who's sitting down with the plant who keeps moving around.
The photographer.
Yeah, the photographer and the subject, right, who's taking
Right.
a picture of.
Who wouldn't sit still.
Right, and it was probably like a real life experience that they went through probably many times. Because remember, a lot of these people had never taken a photograph before. And so they would go in there like, what is that? And they would go right up to the camera, or they would like, can I put the plant on it with me? And like, no.
Just
Wow.
sit still. Don't
Yeah,
move.
exactly.
That's so funny.
In the early photography, you had to sit still until the exposure was done. So it wasn't like you snapped a photo and it was done. It was like
It's like sit still.
hours later, then it's done. Otherwise, it becomes blurry.
Yep.
So,
Stay very still.
some of the dance numbers, I feel like so many of these short film subject has such a variety of things, whether it's dancing or
Right.
music performance with the synced audio, or comedy bits, or a lot of funny stuff, or a little bit of serious stuff. I feel like all these things shows sort of the performance arts of its time, right? Of the 1900s, you had this, you had the Dance of the Seasons, Winter Snow Dance, Landlady, Turn of Century Surgery. Very whimsical, too. I don't know if you guys noticed, there's a sign in the back for the surgery, please do not cry.
Yeah, I saw that. That's funny.
No, I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah, I had a big screen so I could blow it up and see there's in French and English. And there's a few colorized films. If you guys noticed that, hand colored, every single frame hand colored.
Yeah, hand colored.
And
the
I
Spain ones.
I thought that was very interesting. I liked that. It brought it to life.
That's very common from then through all the way through 1900s, 1910s, and it kind of slowly died away in the 1920s.
Yeah.
I
thought that.
Go ahead.
I've seen it before. We've covered it in some other podcast, but the lady with the Cabbage Patch Kids was
Yes, we have.
still disturbing to me.
Yes.
I hate that soundtrack. Oh,
Yeah.
like
see
who
the-
likes
to
wet
see her-
smooches? Ugh.
Yeah. I was just she pulls that first baby out by the arm and picks it up right by the arm, and I'm like, is this a real kid? Yes, it's a real kid. And she's picking it up by the arm.
Yeah. It is a fairy tale of how kids can be found. It's kind of the French version of the stork tale, essentially. The kids are born for the Cabbage Patches rather than
That's so funny.
storks. That's kind of.
I'll bet you 99 out of 100 better than that. People that bought Cabbage Patch Kids, the dolls, didn't know anything about that.
Maybe, yeah, I don't
Nope.
know.
I had one. No way.
I don't know if there is a direct correlation.
But at the
Maybe
time
there
you
is.
had one, you didn't know the tale, did you?
No. I think I
No.
got it when I was 3 or something.
Yeah, only because it was a trend.
hmm
Because it's so ugly, why would anyone really want one?
Well, they were definitely better looking than the Furbies. My mom wanted to have a Furby. But I had a Cabbage Patch doll. That was cute.
So then we go down to the Serpentine dance again. There's a second version of that in the 1902s. There's a midwife to the upper class, an untimely intrusion. Oh, what I was going to say earlier is that the set design was pretty incredible too. Some of the sets extends the background all the way to feel like you're filming something in far away. Like some of the gardens and some of the sets, like about the statue one. It feels like they extended the set into miles and miles and miles to the horizon. You know what I mean? So I felt like that was pretty cool. Something that Méliès already kind of also did in A Trip to the Moon later, I think. I don't know if he did it in his shorts. But for these films, she's certainly done a number with these sets that were painted but extended all the way. It felt like it was going all the way.
They had depth.
Yeah, it had depth, exactly.
Yeah, and forced perspective. I think that's the right term.
Absolutely. Then we come to Untimely Intrusion, Miss Dundee and her performing dogs. So, again, these are capturing things that were probably already acts on stage.
And not seen by the public in general.
Probably for hundreds of years now. There are probably some versions of them in modern times, I bet.
Right.
It's just
but, I mean, most people at the time wouldn't have got to see that if she didn't put it on film.
But it's also interesting.
And still may not have seen it because a lot of the people at the time may not have seen her work.
Yeah, but it's also interesting how far and wide that these acts seems to have influence either locally or like globally. Like that dance, the Serpentine dance, seems pretty global. Almost every country's early silent films probably had some version of that. You know, America's had it, this had it, you know, Japan's probably got it, and Germany probably has some version of it. It's just so fascinating, like, how it seems like this really simple thing, but it's like, wow, everybody's got it. But that dog thing certainly is unique. The fact that the dogs could stay still was a miracle, I'd say.
I did like Mrs. Dundee's dogs. I thought that one was really fun to watch. You know, just agreeing with you guys.
The only part I really loved was the grieving widow kept going back to mourn.
Oh, the dog. Yeah. She was like,
Well, the little dog was dressed up like a widow and kept going over and putting her head down. The other dog just laid there like it was dead.
Well trained.
Yeah. That amused me. 4 times it went back and said, "Oh." I mean, you can almost see that it had lines.
Yeah. 1903, keep moving, is How Monsieur Takes His Bath. That has a huge amount of just staccato cutting of like his clothes.
Oh yes, I actually liked that part quite a bit. I thought that was very funny. I actually thought it could have been done better because I was thinking about if every clip she had put a new layer underneath the layer he was taking off, it would have been seamless. But she had some ones where it was like stark changes.
Yeah. I feel like all the contemporaries, they were all doing very similar works in that respect. The next one's the Faust and the Mephistopheles. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Mephistopheles.
Yeah. The story behind that, I'm just going to read this straight through because it's actually it does affect the story of sort of how that short came about. Because I didn't know this, but apparently, basically Faust made a pact with the devil, right? And the Mephistopheles is the manifestation of the devil's representative or something.
Right.
And one of the bargains he uses, it's sort of like a genie thing. He would just bargain with the devil, trying to like seduce, an innocent girl, beautiful innocent girl, usually named Gretchen, whose life is destroyed when she had a bastard son. And so all of these imagery that you saw in the short was a physical manifestation of this story, of the Faust story.
Right.
So I thought that was incredibly, very similar in some respect to the Dante's Inferno, right? Which is either around the same time period or later.
A long time ago, when I was young, I heard the tale I heard of Mephistopheles was that it was one of the names of the devil that if you said it, he would appear. So you were never supposed to say the word.
Like,
which is why they make it which is why they make it near impronounceable.
Right. It's like Candyman, right? The whole
exactly. Exactly.
Which is
That's where that concept comes from.
Which is probably a homage to the Faust thing. So.
Precisely.
Anyways, so I just thought that was interesting because in the midst of all this comedy and entertaining acts of stage, you have this like really serious take on Faust's tales. Like, whoa, that was I don't know. I couldn't see any other tales.
Chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. Insert drama. Chuckle, chuckle, chuckle.
Well, that's because they're all just, there's different shorts, variety of shorts.
It's almost a random selection, except chronological.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so now we're towards the end of the set. 1905, you got the bricklayer, which is the thing we talked about. And even in just roughly 10 years, from 1896, 97, roughly to 1905, we could see the maturity of the filmmaking. Like we always talk about visual language or filmmaking language of how
the 1905 ones that were labeled as chrono scenes, where they actually had the sound attached and very well attached, actually kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
I said I didn't think talkies were around till the 1920s, and there it is, 1905, and I was like, what?
Yeah, but it's not really talkies because it's not synchronized. Dialogue is really the gauge.
It was really synchronized, actually, if you watched the lips of the singers.
Right. Well, how it's done, of course, is, there's a vinyl or optical disc that they record the music with the artists.
And they play it along with it.
Yeah, and they would lip sync it. That's what they're doing. So.
Oh, no kidding.
So they're lip syncing to the vinyl record.
That's well done.
And then when they restored this film, they would take the original music from optical media or a vinyl, restore it, and play it in the same playback speed at 11 frames a second or 13 frames a second of the film, so that both we use computer technology now to restore it, so that it would
that's very clever.
Exactly be in sync. But back in the days, it was really hard to play. Like if you were a public exhibition, you would almost never get it right, and you basically would almost be out of sync.
That's funny.
Sense.
That's why I never took off, right?
Because when I think of Singing in the Rain, it presents, the talkies that's coming in the late 1920s.
Yeah.
And
1920s.
Yeah, 1920s.
Right.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that they didn't have the sound attached to the film even at that point, right? They were playing the sound separately.
Well, it was really
because that's why the film would go out of sync with the sound, as if.
Well, sort of. So they had the technology. Edison had demonstrated the technology by recording the film track inside of the film negative, but it never really got either him or some other tech company. I think it was the Vitograph company.
Really?
That really popularized the technology. And they would often try to solve the problems by having a separate audio medium, separate than the film. So the audio, like the way that Alice Guy-Blaché did it, they had either a vinyl, some sort of optical audio system that would have the audio play back and you lip sync to it, right? So that doesn't really work well when it comes to dialogue, right?
Right.
What they ultimately, with the talkies finally, the breakthrough is that Vitograph and companies like them, again, nobody's first. Everybody's building on top of one another, essentially. But what they ended up doing was recording the audio onto the film track, that in between the sprockets, right along the film image itself,
the sound bar.
the sound bar would finally be recorded. And when that happened, that's what caused film speed to stop being variable, because film speed back in pre-1927 would be either 11 frames a second to 14 frames a second to 19 frames a second, or jumps in between all these speeds variably because it's hand cranked into 24 frames a second, because with 24 frames a second you have stable dialogue instead of slower
now is that
chipmunk sound, right? So
now is that part of the reason why also you'd be watching a film and between scenes you might see people moving at an accelerated rate rather than normal rate?
Potentially. You're talking about silent films. Yeah, potentially. It really depends on the movie. Yeah, but yes, it's part of the issue with the rate in which the frames appear per second.
Mm-hmm.
But the audio was the thing that made it 24 frames a second, standardizes that, but also that it's really about the synchronized dialogue, which Al Jones, the jazz singer in the 1927 was really... But even then, it was mostly song and lip-synced, and they had a few lines of dialogue, but it was New York, New York, another talkie that came out that popularized the dialogue, that had like wall-to-wall dialogue. That was the true talkie. People often point to that Al Johnson one because it had a few lines of dialogue, but it wasn't wall-to-wall dialogue. It was just a bunch of songs, right? It was almost like a musical with a few lines of dialogue.
Right. Yeah.
In my opinion, it doesn't really count. But New York, New York is the one that has, beginning to end, like a typical now classic films of just wall-to-wall dialogue. And that's what really counts, is when you get synchronized sound. That's the dawn of talkies, essentially. But before that, there was a lot of experiments, certainly. And Alice Key's definitely one of the earliest ones, if you had to peg one. And we had talked about I think there was the True Jiu-Jitsu. We had seen that before, although this was kind of a different version of it. There must have been different versions of this, I think. I don't know. But anyways, what do you think about that, the overall disc and the variety of stuff that was in it? And by the way, one more thing. There's a bunch of Spain and the tango bullfighting.
The various dances,
So since I read the memoir, what happened was that towards the end, this is basically this whole Gaumont studio era. Towards the end here, she started traveling a lot, and she traveled to Spain and would capture all this stuff using her camera.
Yep.
And that's where she went and captured all that stuff. And during all of this traveling, she then met the husband, Herbert Guy, who ultimately married her, and then they moved to America after that.
How about that?
So this is the Gaumont era, is her filmmaking for that studio, Gaumont Studio, up to whatever year that was. I think it was 1907-ish, I think. Yeah, 07. And when that was totally done, she completed her career here, and this basically ended her career once she got married and moved to Long Island, New York, I think, or somewhere on there, and towards Jersey. And that's where she started her Solax, and that's where her U.S.-based Solax film career started. And then there's a lot of films made after that. A totally different era for her film career era. So what do you think overall of about a third of this disc one that you guys have seen overall?
It's a good variety. Mostly comedies, but you're right, we do have the drama with the Faust, not Dante's Inferno. But it's also interesting to watch, because you're right, they are demos, they're just starting out, but it's like I mentioned before, they're the slices of life, and what else can I add to it? It's just, even though some of them are a little more slow or boring than others, you do want to see what the next one is as you go up in year and see how they progress.
I agree. It's academic. It's not. To me, it's not nearly as entertaining as a movie like Battleship Potemkin.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, I did get some entertainment out of it. There was a lot to go through that I thought was rather mundane, but all in all, there were some highlights that I liked.
Yeah, and that's part of it is that, and that's the struggle I often have watching some of these really early experimental films, is that there's a part of me that loves history. There's a part of me that really wants to know how the nook and cranny of how the foundation of film language is built. It's literally short film by short film by short film like this. And
Right.
these short films, like you say, is often just capturing mundane parts of life, right?
Yep.
On film, and in some ways preserving that as history.
Yes, I appreciate it for that,
Exactly.
but not as for entertainment.
But not necessarily for like a narrative film or telling us a story, or I think eventually it gets to that, and I feel like there are pieces of it, like the Faust thing was pretty interesting, if one had to say. And I feel like even the birth and life and death of Christ that we're going to watch next week has many elements of that pulled together, but still very much like not very narrative driven, But what's interesting is you'll see in the last third, I fast forwarded towards the end, is that a lot of that starts to come together more. I think with a lot more experience.
And just over time, more
yeah.
experience.
Both herself, but also her fellow filmmakers, they all mutually, I think, inspire one another. And as one person comes out with a narrative film, the other person's like, oh, that's interesting. You could do that with this technology and this medium. I could do something like that too. And I think that's what happens is over time, the narrative nature starts to show itself. And then we can then start to see the power of what this, the filmmaking language completely change into the things like Potemkin and all the other things that we talked about previously, like Nosferatu and other things. But I think it takes time. It's it takes so much time. I think all the way from the 1895s all the way through probably 1905s before narrative film starts to mature and congeal more and starts to make more sense. And that's my challenge too, is as much as like there's this academic / historic side of me that loves and enjoys finding out and ingesting some of this, but also it's like challenging because when you're watching it's like it is kind of like history. And that's why I think a lot of people who are into silent films often write about it instead of talk about or even watch it in the sense that they watch like regular movies.
To elaborate on what you were just talking about the innovators at the time, how they were building off of each other. It reminds me, of the musicians of the 60s who were like at Woodstock, and they were, they would jam together on the side, and they would teach each other things, and they would actually go over to each other's houses and work things out together. And there wasn't I couldn't say there was much. I mean, I wasn't there, but as far as I've learned, there wasn't any, this is I came up with this idea and that idea. It wasn't possessive about the music, and these days I think that all those elements of filming, they'd be less willing to share with each other because of competitive marketing, and I think that's kind of sad.
That's certainly true. In some respects, there are certain parts of the industry that are, less likely to share some of their tech and techniques and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that the industry moved out west where they weren't being. The reason that film studios went west and it grew out there was because of something like that. I don't remember how you put it.
Oh, it was because Edison, being the shrewd businessman that he was, he tried to copyright every single film technique. He basically was like, you're gonna shoot with a dolly. That's copyrighted, and
that's what I was talking about. That's what I was talking about.
a dolly, a shot again, you're gonna pay me some royalty. So
that's what I was talking about. And it's
Yeah.
nice to go back, and what you were saying is the recognition of back when these innovators were all looking at each other's work and didn't have that marketing greed.
right,
Things flowed and the ideas flowed and people could
except for
expand.
Edison.
Except for Edison. Yeah.
So-
People could expand on their skills much more easily because they had other people to work with.
But it's interesting also to know that there were people like them back then, and it's as much as we feel like the industry has evolved then and now. Like then and now, you got shysters like that as well as people
Even
who
then,
like
you
the
had
show.
people like Edison.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Uh,
So in either century, in either millennium, you get the same peoples. So
it's sad.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all right, well, that's all.
all in
I have.
all, it was worth watching. I enjoyed enough of it to make make me feel like it was worth watching.
And after that, next week we're gonna do the birth, life, and death of Christ, and after that we're gonna do the rest of the disc. And then
That I'm looking forward to. That I'm really looking forward to.
I think there is still a few more pieces of film. This is not everything that's remaining that we have of hers. I think there's still a few more, especially The Ocean Wave, one of her most complete film, full length that we've ever seen.
Oh,
That's
with
not
a
on
narrative?
with a narrative. That's one that's not on this list that we'll have to get to later on. But there may be a few more. I got to do some more research and dig in. But while we're here, I think we should just kind of complete that and kind of be done with her as much as we can. Because honestly, we can't really be because we don't have her full catalog of films.
I gotcha.
Right? But as much as it is available to us now through technology and through what we have access to, get through everything, I would say.
Be done with her. Get the
done.
guillotine.
So I think even just looking at this, I would say that certainly she was quite the innovator, right? But I think on the other hand, I would also say that I don't know if she is 100%, the innovator, like, because we watched this documentary a while back, Lily, of the Be Natural.
Be Natural, yeah.
Yeah, and the filmmaker documentary was like, oh, she was making stuff that nobody's ever made. I don't know about nobody's ever made. There's, again, George Méliès and other people have contemporaries that were doing something similar. Not exactly the same, but I would say that the unique feature is that she's a woman doing these things. And that's, I think, unique unto itself.
Yeah, and possibly that's what makes her stand out more than, just kind of ignoring the men that are doing it. Like, oh, but look at her! Even though they're also like, hey, we're doing it too.
Yeah.
One thing I was theorizing is that maybe because the telegraph was out back then, right? Maybe that's how they were all getting their information around the globe. They're like,
also writing letters, too.
Yeah, letters, too. I don't. It was just one theory. I'm thinking, like, well, how is everybody getting this technology? Well, letters, one. You could draw diagrams, but yeah, telegraphs is another option.
But remember, Méliès was in the same city. Like, they probably, potentially, I don't know for sure, it's not in the memoir, but may have coffee or tea together and talk to each other,
Oh, yeah, and that's another thing I was thinking about, too, when you were telling about Guy-Blaché. It's just, well, no wonder she knew all those famous people. Like, she had to kind of make those connections so she could just branch out, and that's really smart. I mean, that's kind of that's the ideal way to do it, even in the film industry now. You want to make all those connections so you know people and you get investments, and then you make friends and you can film their work. It's kind of like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. So
absolutely.
And it's just like, wow,
Well,
really,
I think
we think we're so advanced, and we're kind of the same as we were, and give or take.
Yeah, but the fact that she was a woman doing this at the time she did, the fact that it gained her notoriety, even though other men were doing the same things, it's rightly deserved by her as a woman at the time.
Yes, absolutely.
It's bold, and she deserves notoriety for that. What's neat is, or what I would like to see, actually, if it already hasn't been done, is a modern film on her.
Oh yeah, that would be cool
Oh, yeah.
if they made one. Yeah. She wrote for trade publications back then too, like photo plays, like sort of like what we have today, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, and Deadline, which is our trade publications for Hollywood. But back then, photo play existed, it was similar in a similar vein, and she wrote articles for them, basically saying that as a woman running her business, especially when she moved to America, they had a copy. They reprinted some copies of her articles in a memoir, and I thought that was pretty interesting to have her thoughts about like everyone on my set is equal, and we just concentrate on the performances of meritocracy here. It's like, whoa, it's so forward thinking. But anyways, it's pretty cool. Having said all of that, but anyways, so let's keep on wrapping up here. Thoughts. It certainly like her command of the filmmaking visual languages to do all of this without any prior record or any prior history or any other prior work to work off of was, I would say, pretty amazing. Like anybody who was making movies at that time, 1895s, without anything, you're trailblazing. Nobody's ever done all of this stuff, the synchronized sound or any of those things. So, but the virtue of doing all these things, even capturing the theatrical performances and the stage of those things, is pretty cool. Any other parting thoughts before we conclude?
No, we'll see how it works. I mean, we'll see how the birth and life and death of Christ goes next week. I'm interested to watch it again and just, let's hear our thoughts about just everything on it. That's all I have to comment on.
Cool beans. All right. Thank you, listeners, for participating with us, listening to some retrospective on a lot of really history stuff, essentially, on actualities and sort of documenting the past. You can find more of our work at watchingsilentfilms.wordpress.com. Again, that's watchingsilentfilms, plural.wordpress.com. You can also download our podcast wherever podcasts are found. And also, if you can leave a review and star rating in Apple's podcast platform, I would greatly appreciate it. It would help other filmmakers and film lovers find us there. And also, you can email us with questions, comments, answers, and, well, if you have answers, please give it to us at watchingsilentfilms@gmail.com. That's watchingsilentfilms, plural, @gmail.com. And we will talk to you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.